Welcome to another Sherlock lesson. This is advanced vocabulary for the series called Elementary. It's an American version of Sherlock. We're just looking at some vocabulary today, and we're going to revise inversion as well, because I get a lot of questions about inversion. But first of all, phrasal verbs. Lots of good phrasal verbs in this episode. Drum up, first of all, as in drumming up business. Sherlock spoke about business cards being used to drum up business for the firm of lawyers. Attorneys, they call them in this episode, which is an American word for lawyer. And so, they use these cards to drum up business and make sure people find out about their company. I obviously use these YouTube videos, firstly, to get information to my students, and secondly, to drum up business. Okay, back out means that you have a plan, but maybe at the last moment, or maybe earlier, you decide, for whatever reason, to drop out. You decide not to take part in your plan, or not to carry out your plan, and so you back out. It's usually when you have agreed to do something with other people. So in this episode, Sherlock assured Watson that his father would back out. He had agreed to meet them at dinner, but he told her that his father would always back out. Now, back down is similar to back out, but back down really means give in. Give in. So if you are very stubborn, then you don't usually give in. You don't usually back down. You stick to your guns and you stay determined to do whatever you want to do. But if you back down, you give in and you say, okay, I'm sorry, you win, and you stop arguing or fighting in your position. Okay, if you show up, you simply turn up, exactly the same as turn up somewhere. And so Sherlock promised her that his father wouldn't show up. He promised her that his father would back out and not show up. Okay, to cave in, a house could cave in, and it would mean that the roof, unfortunately, has fallen in. The building has fallen in on itself. If it's a building like this, cave in. If the walls cave in, it means they fall in like this. They cave in. And Sherlock used this expression, this phrasal verb, which obviously comes from the word cave, to describe how in the murder somebody had caved his skull in. Somebody had used a very heavy spanner, also called a wrench, and had murdered one of the men inside the plane crash, and so he had caved his skull in. You could also say he had bludgeoned him, which we'll come on to in a moment, because there were signs of blunt force trauma. Okay, to soldier on, it means to continue regardless of difficulty or something like that, to put on a brave face and just keep going like a soldier and not whine, not complain. And so Sherlock said he would soldier on in spite of some kind of illness, I think, in this episode. I can't actually remember, being honest, but to soldier on, it means to carry on in spite of difficulty, illness, or something like that. To be brave in spite of adverse circumstances. Okay, to be amputated. One of the victims in the plane crash, his leg had been amputated. His leg had been cut off during the crash. So amputate just means cut off. A doctor may need to amputate one of your limbs if you get involved in an accident. Bludgeon, it just means hit someone with a heavy object. So the murder victim was bludgeoned, and his skull caved in. To testify means to give your testimony, your witness testimony in court. So testify, it means to go into court and testify in front of the judge. To sabotage someone's plans, it means to spoil their plans in some kind of way. This was used because somebody sabotaged the engine on the plane. Somebody had clogged the engine with sand. Now, clog we use when some kind of motor or machine gets stuck somewhere. We say it's clogged, or you could even use clog when a pipe would get clogged with some kind of solid, manky, horrible, dirty stuff. It might get clogged. The radiators might get clogged. And so clog, it just means you could use it for your arteries, actually, or veins. Your arteries or veins get clogged with fatty acids, and then hopefully, and then you may have some health problems. perhaps even a heart attack if the arteries are really clogged. So clogged, it means something gets stuck somewhere. Run an errand is just do some kind of task. So we all have errands to run every single day, and you've got to try and make sure they get done, otherwise you have problems. So errands are just general daily tasks. To be drawn to someone or something means to be attracted to someone or something. Remember that draw doesn't only mean draw a picture, it also means if you draw something towards you, then you bring it towards you. And so it's like to be attracted to. And to be glued to is obviously to be unable to tear yourself away from. And so Sherlock was glued to the radio at the start. Some people get glued to the TV. Collocations. The plane crash was described as a smouldering pile of wreckage. Obviously this smouldering, it means kind of slightly burning. There's a pile of wreckage. The wreckage is all the metal from the plane and the fuselage, all the pieces of the plane which are all over the beach, and they're smouldering because they're still on fire. Smouldering means smoking and still on fire. Unravel the complex chain of events. Unravel means untie. If you unravel a knotted piece of string, you're untying all the knots in the string and unravelling it. Well, Sherlock has to unravel the complex chain of events. It's a nice collocation. Now, Sherlock suspected that there was a premeditated crime here because I think there wasn't enough blood near from the amputation, and so he decided the victim had died earlier, and that and he also noticed somebody had sabotaged the engine. So this was definitely a premeditated crime. Premeditated means that you've planned it beforehand. Unwarranted concern. I think Watson was very concerned that Sherlock was trying to avoid his father, but he said your concern is unwarranted. It's not unnecessary. It's undeserved. It shouldn't be there, because he was going to back out at the last minute anyway. A prime suspect is the main suspect, the guy who everybody thinks has committed the crime. An outrageous request is an extraordinary request or an unbelievable request, something very highly unusual. And a compelling argument is a convincing argument. It's exactly the same as a highly persuasive argument. Okay, so that's all the vocabulary. You should answer some questions under the video to practice this vocab. So, for example, what do you do at work to drum up business? Maybe some of you own your own companies, but maybe for the company you work for, how do they drum up business? Are you the kind of person who backs out of plans at the last minute? Yeah, try and get using this vocabulary, otherwise you'll never learn it. You've got to use it in sentences. Are you the kind of person who puts a brave face on and soldiers on in spite of difficulties? Do you know anyone who has had to have a limb amputated? I certainly hope not, but unfortunately, bad things happen sometimes. Well, hopefully you don't know anyone who has ever been bludgeoned. And yeah, please, I'll put some questions under the video, so please answer my questions to practice some of this vocabulary. Inversion. Please remember that there are 2 or 3 main situations we use inversion in. One of them is conditionals, second and third conditionals. The second one, another one is auxiliary verbs, especially in questions and also in echo questions. Lastly, we also use inversion with negative adverbials, such as only, which doesn't sound very negative, but it is a negative expression. Only, at no time, under no circumstances. Also, we do it with so and such, okay? If you're not sure about these rules, just watch my video on inversion. I'll put a link up to it. So, trying to guess the missing words here. The first one's third conditional. Died in the crash, there would have been more blood. So this was a deduction Sherlock made, and it was about a victim. So I hope you straight away understand you need an auxiliary verb here. It's third conditional, so the auxiliary verb should be had. Had the victim. Let's call it the victim, but it could just be he. Had he died? Had the victim died in the crash, there would have been more blood. But he didn't die in the crash. He can't have died in the crash. He must have been killed before the plane took off. Okay, only later find out the whistleblower had diabetes. Please remember, a whistleblower is a guy like who tells the authorities that his company or his newspaper or his government, his organisation has been misbehaving in some kind of way. Famous whistleblowers are people like Ed Snowden or Julian Assange. But there was a whistleblower in this episode. Okay, so only later did Sherlock find out the whistleblower had diabetes. We just need past simple here. Okay, next one. So compelling. I hope you can guess the noun I'm going to use. So remember, with this, so compelling was the argument that we all agreed. Yeah, so compelling was the argument that we all agreed. Yeah, so compelling was the deduction that we all agreed. Okay, Holmes warned her that under no circumstances, he's talking about his father, of course, under no circumstances would his father show up. Okay, we use would here because will becomes would when we're reporting this story as we are. We're using a reporting verb here. So he warned her that under no circumstances, will becomes would his father show up. Next one, no sooner examined the sand than he concluded that it wasn't from that beach. So you can see here, I hope, that this is going to be past perfect. Because we're in narrative tenses. Here's a past tense, so it's not going to be present perfect, although it could be if this was all in present tense, it could be then. But here, no sooner had he examined the sand, had Sherlock examined the sand, and he concluded it wasn't from that beach. Okay, last one. Rarely, we're just talking in general here about always, and so we're just going to use present simple. Rarely confess to their crimes. Of course, I'm talking about culprits or perpetrators, which is two words we've learnt from this series. We should have a comma here. You've probably learnt that from my comma lessons. Rarely do culprits confess to their crimes. Or do perpetrators confess to their crimes. It would be good as well. Okay, if you have any questions about inversion, please put it under this video or the video on inversion. I like questions under the right videos because it helps other people and it helps me as well. If you have any questions about the vocabulary, please ask me. And please look at the questions underneath the video and you answer those questions to use this vocabulary and make it active. You know, it's got to be active vocabulary. It's got to be practiced often. Okay, thanks for watching this episode and I hope to see you all soon.